Jack Carter's eyes snapped open, the sharp sting of cold metal pressing against his back. His head throbbed, and his vision blurred before slowly sharpening. Overhead, dim crimson lights flickered along the ceiling, casting an eerie glow across the dark chamber. His arms were restrained against the cold steel of the table beneath him, and his legs were bound at the ankles. Panic crawled up his spine, but he forced himself to steady his breathing. "Where the hell am I?" he muttered. A mechanical hiss sounded from the far end of the room. The wall slid apart in sections, revealing a tall figure stepping into the light. Its skin was dark and scaly, with a faint shimmer beneath the red lights. Vertical slits lined its throat, expanding and contracting as it breathed. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, fixed intently on Jack. "Human," the creature said, its voice deep and resonant. "You are awake." Jack narrowed his eyes. "Yeah, lucky me." The alien stepped closer, and Jack's restraints hummed with energy. He strained against them, but they tightened painfully in response. The alien's gaze traveled over him like it was studying prey. "I am Commander Talon of the Zalketh Dominion," the creature said. "Your kind has become an inconvenience." Jack smirked despite the situation. "Glad to know we're on your radar." Talon's eyes narrowed. "Do not mistake this for admiration. Your species is weak, primitive. But you survived the ambush on Outpost 47. Jack's jaw tightened. He remembered the burning wreckage of the colony, the screams of the dying, the searing heat of plasma fire as the Zalketh fleet descended. He'd fought his way through the chaos, barely making it out alive before the evacuation transports jumped away. "And now you are here," Talon continued. "The Council wishes to understand what makes humans so resilient." Jack tugged at the restraints. "You could have just asked." Talon's lips curled back, revealing sharp, polished teeth. "You will be tested." Jack's gut tightened. Tested how? A low hum filled the room, and the table beneath Jack began to rise. His restraints disengaged and retracted. He stumbled forward, catching himself before hitting the floor. His head whipped toward Talon, whose expression remained cold. A metallic grinding noise echoed through the chamber. The floor split apart in front of Jack, forming a path toward an open chamber beyond. Cold mist drifted through the air, illuminated by pale blue lights. Jack's hands curled into fists as he stepped toward the threshold. "This is the stress relief chamber," Talon said, his tone almost amused. "Our warriors use it to sharpen their skills. And you're throwing me in there." Talon's gaze darkened. "You will either survive or not." Jack's pulse hammered as he stepped into the chamber. The door behind him slammed shut with a loud clang. Fog hissed along the edges of the room as the lights shifted to a deep red. A disembodied voice echoed through the chamber. "Stress relief protocol initiated. Begin combat phase." Jack's eyes darted around the room. The walls began to shift, metal panels rising and falling, creating obstacles and barriers. The floor vibrated beneath his feet as sleek metallic forms began emerging from the ground. Drones. Their curved, insect-like limbs twitched as they rose, plasma emitters glowing at their sides. Jack tensed. "Well, shit." The first drone fired. A searing plasma bolt shot toward Jack's head. He threw himself sideways, rolling into cover behind a metallic pillar. The heat from the blast scorched the floor beside him. Jack's neural implants surged to life, a tactical overlay flickering across his vision. His targeting grid came online, highlighting weak points on the drone's carapaces. "All right," Jack muttered. "Let's see what you've got." He sprang from cover, closing the distance between himself and the nearest drone. The drone's arm rotated, aiming another shot. Jack ducked, sliding beneath its chassis and driving his elbow into the exposed joint beneath its thorax. The drone shuddered and collapsed in a heap of sparking metal. Jack turned, but two more drones were already advancing. His neural overlay predicted their trajectories. Jack darted toward the nearest wall, using a handhold to flip himself upward. He fired his wrist-mounted plasma blaster mid-spin, striking one drone's core. It exploded in a shower of sparks. The second drone lunged, its bladed arm slashing toward Jack's head. Jack twisted, narrowly avoiding the strike as he drove his knee into its chest. The drone stumbled, and Jack seized its arm, forcing it upward and firing into its power core. The drone's eyes flickered before it crumpled to the ground. Jack breathed hard, the heat of the battle washing over him. The floor beneath his feet shifted again. The walls around him opened, revealing a second wave of drones, larger, faster, with glowing energy shields crackling over their frames. Jack grimaced. Of course it's not over. A plasma round blasted past his shoulder, and Jack dove behind a column as the drones advanced. His tactical overlay flashed, identifying weak points in their shields. Jack fired at a cluster of exposed wiring beneath one drone's arm. Sparks erupted, and the drone staggered. Jack followed up with a second shot to its power core, destroying it. But the others were closing in fast. Jack flipped over the nearest drone, landing on its back. He wrapped his arm around its neck and fired point-blank into its skull. The drone's body collapsed beneath him. Jack rose to his feet, chest heaving. His vision blurred with sweat. A loud metallic click echoed through the chamber. Jack's gaze snapped upward as the walls at the far end began to open. A figure stepped through the fog. 7 feet tall, armored from head to toe in reflective obsidian plating. Talon's curved energy blade shimmered in his hand. His yellow eyes glowed through the mist. Talon's gaze swept over the wreckage of the fallen drones. His expression remained cold. Impressive, for a human. Jack raised his weapon. Round 2. Talon smiled. Round 2. Talon lunged forward, faster than Jack anticipated. Jack barely dodged the first strike as Talon's blade sliced through the air, leaving a trail of glowing energy. Jack blocked the second strike with his forearm, his combat suit absorbing most of the impact, but the force still sent him skidding backward. Jack steadied himself, eyes narrowing. His neural implant fed him real-time analysis of Talon's movements. Jack adjusted his stance. Talon vanished, reappearing behind Jack with a flicker of energy. Jack twisted just in time to block the next strike, their weapons sparking against each other. Jack lashed out with his elbow, striking Talon's jaw. Talon staggered, but only for a second. Talon's blade shot toward Jack's throat. Jack ducked and fired point-blank into Talon's shoulder. The blast knocked Talon backward, but he remained standing. Talon's eyes narrowed in dangerous amusement. "You're holding back," Talon said. Jack wiped the sweat from his brow. "Trust me, you don't want to see me go all out." Talon's smile widened. "Good." The chamber's lights dimmed. The floor began to shift again. Jack's neural implant registered rising energy levels. His pulse hammered in his ears as the A's voice echoed once more. Phase 2, initiated. Jack's lips curled into a tight smile. "Bring it on." Jack's muscles tensed as the floor beneath his feet shifted again, the panels grinding and locking into place. A deep hum vibrated through the walls, and the crimson lights overhead pulsed with a sinister rhythm. His neural implant fed him tactical data at lightning speed, threat assessments, enemy positioning, and the fluctuating energy signatures within the chamber. His mind processed it all in milliseconds. The problem was, none of it gave him a clear way out. Talon stood at the far end of the chamber, his obsidian armor gleaming beneath the red lights. His energy blade pulsed with a faint, crackling glow as he tilted his head toward Jack. "Phase 2, Talon said, his voice low and measured. "Let us see how long you can last." Jack's lips curled into a tight smile. "You might be surprised." Talon's figure blurred as he shot forward with terrifying speed. Jack barely registered the movement before he twisted, rolling to the side as Talon's blade slashed through the air where his head had been. Sparks erupted from the wall as the blade cut into the metal surface. Jack planted his hands on the floor, using the momentum to spring to his feet. He spun and fired his wrist blaster toward Talon's exposed flank. Talon's arm shot up, and his energy shield shimmered into place. The plasma bolts deflected harmlessly. Jack swore under his breath and pivoted, just in time to block Talon's next strike with his forearm. His combat suit absorbed most of the impact, but the force still drove him back several feet. Jack hit the floor hard and rolled, narrowly avoiding another downward strike. He sprang to his feet and raised his weapon, only to feel the cold edge of Talon's blade press against his throat. "You are quick," Talon said, his tone almost amused, "but not quick enough." Jack's gaze sharpened. "Wanna bet?" Jack's knee shot upward, slamming into Talon's side. Talon's grip faltered for a fraction of a second, just long enough for Jack to grab his wrist and twist. Talon's blade sparked as it hit the floor. Jack fired point-blank into Talon's chest. The force sent Talon skidding across the chamber. Talon's body slammed into the wall, leaving a dent in the reinforced metal. Jack panted, his heart pounding in his ears. He knew that wouldn't be enough to stop him. Talon rose to his feet, his gaze sharper now. His armor hummed as the cracks in the plating began to repair themselves. "Interesting," Talon said, his voice calm. "You are adapting." Jack's hand tightened around his weapon. Humans tend to do that. The floor beneath them began to glow. Jack's neural implant flared with warning signals. A rising surge of energy spiked across his tactical display. "Stress level increase detected," the AI's voice echoed. Jack's eyes narrowed. Oh, great. The walls split apart, and more drones emerged from hidden compartments. These were larger, heavier, built for close-quarters combat. Their glowing red visors focused on Jack with lethal precision. A high-pitched whine filled the air as their plasma emitters charged. Jack crouched, calculating. His neural implant fed him firing solutions and movement trajectories. He exhaled slowly. "All right, let's dance." The first drone fired, and Jack twisted sideways. The plasma bolt scorched the air inches from his face. Jack lunged toward the nearest drone, vaulting over its frame and landing behind it. He drove his fist into the back of its head, his combat suit enhancing the strike. The drone's skull caved in, and it collapsed with a burst of sparks. The second drone fired from point-blank range. Jack ducked and drove his elbow into the drone's arm, forcing it upward. The plasma shot seared the ceiling. Jack tore the emitter from the drone's arm and jammed it into its power core. The drone shuddered and collapsed. Jack rolled toward the next target, firing as he moved. Plasma bolts struck the drone's chest, but its armor held. The drone swiped at him with a jagged blade, and Jack twisted, barely avoiding the strike. He slid beneath the drone's frame and fired into its exposed undercarriage. It exploded in a shower of blue fire. Talon watched from the far side of the chamber, his expression unreadable. His gaze followed Jack's movements, studying him. Jack could feel it, like Talon was cataloging every reaction, every adjustment. Two more drones advanced from the left. Jack leaped toward the nearest wall, using a protruding ledge to propel himself upward. He spun midair and fired downward, striking both drones in their power cores. The explosion sent him crashing to the floor. He rolled with the impact, coming up on one knee. His breath hitched. His suit's power levels were dropping fast. His neural implant flared red with a warning. Energy reserves at 34%. Jack steadied his breathing. He couldn't afford to slow down. Talon's gaze sharpened. "Your stamina is impressive." Jack smiled grimly. "Years of cardio." Talon stepped forward. His energy blade reignited with a sharp hiss. "Let us test it further." Talon blurred toward Jack, and this time Jack was ready. He met Talon's strike head-on. Their weapons collided with a burst of sparks. Jack slid back several feet from the force of the impact, but he maintained his balance. He ducked beneath Talon's next strike and drove his fist into Talon's ribs. Talon's armor absorbed the blow, but the force still made him stumble. Jack pressed the advantage. He pivoted and launched a high kick toward Talon's head. Talon blocked it with his forearm. but Jack used the momentum to swing his other leg upward, striking Talon's jaw. Talon's head snapped back. Jack followed up with a series of rapid strikes to Talon's chest and shoulder. Talon grunted, his footing shifting. Jack's pulse hammered. He was actually driving Talon back. Talon's eyes gleamed. Yes. Adapt. Fight harder. Jack's instincts screamed too late. Talon's hand shot forward and wrapped around Jack's throat. He lifted Jack off the ground, his grip tightening. Jack's vision darkened at the edges. His suit's warning systems blared. Impressive, Talon said softly. But still, human. Jack's hands shot toward Talon's wrist. He activated the plasma emitters in his gloves, releasing a concentrated burst of energy. Talon's arm spasmed, and his grip slackened. Jack twisted free and dropped to the ground, landing on one knee. He aimed his blaster upward and fired. The bolt struck Talon's shoulder, burning through the armor. Talon's eyes flashed with surprise. Jack stumbled to his feet, chest heaving. Guess what, Talon? Talon's gaze darkened. What? Jack's smile sharpened. We don't break that easy. Talon's expression remained impassive. Good. The floor beneath them pulsed with new energy. The AI's voice returned. Final stress level. Initiated. Jack's heart hammered. He raised his weapon as the chamber's walls peeled away, revealing a massive mechanical construct rising from the floor. Towering, multi-limbed, with energy cores glowing beneath its armor. Its sensors locked onto Jack. Jack exhaled. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Talon's smile returned. Survive this, and you may truly earn my respect. Jack's grip tightened around his weapon. His neural implant flared with new combat data. He allowed himself a small smile. All right, he said. Let's finish this. Jack's breathing was ragged as he crouched behind a broken drone, the heat from the explosion still radiating through his suit. His neural implant fed him data at blinding speed. Enemy positions, energy fluctuations, and the rising stress levels within the chamber. His muscles burned from the constant strain, but he couldn't afford to slow down. The massive mechanical construct at the center of the room adjusted its position, its limbs unfolding with a metallic whine. Red energy pulsed through its joints, and the deep hum of its power core vibrated through the floor beneath Jack's feet. Its targeting sensors locked onto him, the glow intensifying as it charged its plasma cannons. Jack wiped the sweat from his brow, his gaze narrowing. His blaster's charge levels were dangerously low, and his suit's power core was barely holding together. He was running out of options. Come on, Jack muttered. Give me something. The construct's limbs adjusted, its cannons heating up. The air around it shimmered with raw energy. Jack's neural implant blared a warning. Plasma discharge imminent. Jack's instincts screamed at him to move. He rolled to the side just as a searing beam of red energy lanced through the air. It struck the floor where he'd been crouching, leaving a smoking crater in the reinforced metal. The heat washed over him, burning the edges of his suit. Jack hit the ground hard and rolled into a crouch. His fingers brushed the grip of his blaster. He lifted it and fired toward the construct's central core. The bolt struck the armor plating and dissipated harmlessly. Damn it, Jack growled. The construct adjusted its targeting array. Its limbs unfolded further, sharp-edged claws clicking into place. Jack's tactical display flashed with heat signatures. Two more smaller drones emerging from the sidewalls. They hovered toward him, energy pulses building in their emitters. Jack swore under his breath. He couldn't take them all at once. His suit was barely holding together, and the construct's shields were too strong. He needed a distraction, a weakness, something. A blur of motion crossed Jack's vision. His neural implant registered the shift before his eyes could. A dark figure shot forward, cutting through the air with lethal precision. Talon. Talon's obsidian armor reflected the red glow of the chamber's lights. His energy blade ignited with a high-pitched hum. He twisted midair and sliced through the first drone in one clean strike. Sparks exploded outward as the drone collapsed. Talon landed with a soft, metallic clink, his gaze focused on the construct. His body was relaxed, but Jack could see the subtle tension in his stance. His armor shifted and adjusted, glowing with faint pulses of energy. Jack stared. "What the hell are you doing?" Talon's gaze flicked toward him, leveling the field. Jack's eyes narrowed. "You're helping me." Talon's energy blade pulsed brighter. "Consider it a test of your potential." The second drone targeted Talon with a rapid plasma burst. Talon blurred, his figure splitting into 3 distinct afterimages as he moved. The plasma shots passed harmlessly through the false images. Talon reappeared behind the drone and drove his blade into its back. The drone's systems overloaded, and it exploded in a burst of blue fire. Jack pushed himself to his feet. "Not that I'm complaining, but why the sudden change of heart?" Talon's gaze remained focused on the construct. "You showed potential. I am curious how far you can go." Jack snorted. "Glad I'm entertaining you." The construct's targeting array adjusted toward Talon. The plasma cannons whined as they charged. Talon's gaze sharpened. He darted to the side just as the cannons fired. The energy beams sliced through the air, leaving glowing streaks of heat in their wake. Talon twisted, his form a blur as he avoided the blasts with inhuman precision. Jack's neural implant flared with new data. Talon's combat patterns were nearly flawless. His reaction time exceeded anything Jack had ever seen. But even Talon couldn't take the construct down alone. Jack's jaw tightened. His fingers curled around his blaster. "All right, if we're doing this, let's do it right." Talon's gaze flicked toward him. A faint smile curled at the edge of his mouth. "Agreed." Jack sprinted forward, his suit's servos straining under the effort. He raised his blaster and fired toward the construct's head. The shot struck the armored plating and fizzled out. Talon followed the shot, his energy blade cutting upward toward the same point of impact. The blade sparked against the armor, leaving a deep gash. The construct's systems reacted instantly. A cluster of plasma cannons unfolded from its back and fired in rapid succession. Jack and Talon separated, dodging in opposite directions as the ground exploded beneath them. Jack's tactical display flickered. His neural implant locked onto a cluster of exposed wiring beneath the construct's central core. He opened a comm link to Talon. "That core," Jack shouted. "We hit it together." Talon's gaze sharpened. "Understood." Talon shot forward, his energy blade carving a path through the construct's defensive shields. Jack followed, firing his blaster toward the exposed wiring. The first few shots deflected, but one found its mark. Sparks erupted from the core as the systems began to destabilize. The construct's limbs jerked. Its cannons began to overheat, smoke rising from the joints. Its targeting array flickered. "Now," Jack shouted. Talon's form blurred as he shot upward. His blade ignited with a blinding white light. He drove it into the construct's core, cutting cleanly through the reinforced plating. The construct's systems screamed. A cascade of energy pulsed outward as its core destabilized. Talon twisted the blade and leaped away as the construct collapsed inward. Jack dove behind a damaged drone as the construct exploded in a burst of white-hot plasma. The shockwave rattled the walls. Jack's ears rang. His suit's display flickered and then went dark. Slowly, Jack pushed himself upright. Smoke filled the chamber. His systems rebooted, and his neural implant began running diagnostics. Talon stood near the wreckage of the construct. His armor was scorched, and his energy blade was dim. He turned toward Jack. Jack shook his head. "That was insane." Talon's expression remained calm. "You adapted well." Jack exhaled, brushing the dust from his suit. "Don't tell me you planned that." Talon's gaze sharpened. "Perhaps." Jack laughed, shaking his head. "You've got a twisted sense of teamwork." Talon stepped toward him, his gaze intense. "I see potential in you, human. You have earned my respect." Jack's brow furrowed. "Great. So what now?" Talon's gaze lifted toward the chamber ceiling. We are not finished. Jack's neural implant flared with a new warning signal. A low vibration hummed through the floor. The chamber's walls began to shift. Jack's tactical display lit up with new heat signatures. Jack groaned. Of course we're not. Talon's energy blade reignited with a sharp hiss. Shall we? Jack's smile returned. After you. Talon's gaze sharpened, and together, they turned toward the rising threat. Jack's breath was still ragged as he stood next to Talon. The smoldering remains of the construct lay twisted and broken behind them, but there was no time to celebrate. His neural implant blared a warning as the walls of the chamber began to shift. Large panels slid aside, revealing hidden compartments in the ceiling and the walls. Jack's tactical display lit up with new heat signatures, stronger, faster, and more numerous than before. More incoming, Jack muttered. Talon's blade hissed to life. Of course. Jack's eyes narrowed as the first enemies emerged. Sleek, insect-like drones with razor-sharp limbs unfolded from the walls. Their optics glowed red as they targeted Jack and Talon. A deep mechanical growl reverberated through the chamber as the floor beneath them began to pulse with energy. Jack raised his blaster. You ever get tired of this? Talon's expression didn't change. Adapt or die. Great pep talk. The drones launched forward. Jack fired his blaster, his shots ripping through the air. The first drone deflected the blasts with its armored forelimbs and shot toward him with terrifying speed. Jack's neural implant calculated the trajectory in milliseconds. He rolled aside as the drone's claws tore into the floor where he'd been standing. Talon blurred, his energy blade cutting through the air with precision. He sliced through the drone's armored torso, severing its power core. Sparks erupted as the drone collapsed in a heap of twisted metal. Talon didn't even pause before turning toward the next target. Jack's suit strained as he fired again, his blaster overheating from rapid discharge. He slammed the butt of the weapon into another drone's head, knocking it back. His neural implant highlighted weak points in its frame. Jack fired into the exposed joint, and the drone's head exploded in a shower of sparks. Talon's blade cut through another drone, his movements fluid and efficient, but Jack could see the tension in his stance. Talon's armor was damaged, scorch marks along the edges. His energy levels were dropping. We can't keep this up forever, Jack shouted. Talon's gaze flicked toward him. We don't have to. Jack's neural implant registered a change in the room's energy flow. The floor beneath them pulsed with increasing intensity. The energy signatures were focusing toward the center of the chamber. A new threat was emerging. Jack's breath hitched as the ceiling panels slid apart. A massive figure descended from above, easily twice the size of the previous construct. Its frame was armored with dark metal, and its limbs ended in curved plasma blades. Its eyes glowed with pulsing red light. Jack's display identified it immediately. Model X5. Guardian class. Jack swore. Seriously. The Guardian's limbs extended with a deafening metallic shriek. Its plasma blades ignited, casting a crimson glow across the chamber. A low mechanical voice resonated from deep within its frame. Combat parameters updated. Lethal force authorized. Fantastic, Jack muttered. Talon's stance shifted, his energy blade pulsed brighter. This will be challenging. You don't say. The Guardian launched forward with impossible speed. Jack barely had time to dive aside as its plasma blades sliced through the air. Talon intercepted it mid-charge, his energy blade colliding with the Guardian's weapon. Sparks erupted as the two forces met. The impact sent Talon skidding backward. Jack rolled to his feet and fired his blaster toward the Guardian's exposed joints. The shots bounced harmlessly off his armor. His neural implant struggled to find any weak points. Talon recovered instantly, his form a blur as he attacked. His blade carved a glowing arc through the air, striking the Guardian's torso. The strike barely scratched the armor. The Guardian retaliated with a backhand strike that sent Talon crashing into the far wall. Talon, Jack shouted. Talon pushed himself upright, his armor sparking. It's shielded. Jack's jaw tightened. His neural implant fed him fragmented data, energy pulses, and shield harmonics. The Guardian's defenses were nearly impenetrable. The Guardian's plasma blades began to hum with building energy. Jack's neural implant flashed a warning. Plasma discharge imminent. Jack's instincts screamed at him to move. He lunged toward Talon and tackled him just as a blinding burst of plasma erupted from the Guardian's weapons. The heat seared Jack's armor as they crashed behind the remains of a fallen drone. Jack coughed, smoke filling his lungs. All right, that didn't work. Talon pushed Jack off him, his gaze cold. We must adjust our strategy. Jack's mind raced. His neural implant worked overtime, scanning the Guardian's frame for any weakness. The energy signatures pulsed through its core in complex patterns. And then Jack saw it. A split-second fluctuation in the shield harmonics. It was cycling power between its offensive and defensive systems. A small window of vulnerability. Jack grinned. I've got an idea. Talon's gaze sharpened. Explain. Jack reloaded his blaster. I'll draw its fire. You hit the core when its shield drops. Talon's eyes narrowed. That is a foolish plan. Yeah, but it'll work. Before Talon could respond, Jack sprinted forward. The Guardian's sensors locked onto him instantly. Jack raised his blaster and fired in rapid succession. The shots pinged off the armor, doing no damage. The Guardian's plasma blades pulsed brighter, its targeting systems locked. Come on, Jack muttered. The Guardian charged. Jack's neural implant calculated the trajectory. He ducked beneath the first strike and rolled aside as the second blade cut through the floor. He fired toward the Guardian's optics, forcing it to adjust its position. The Guardian's shield pulsed. The energy cycle shifted, just like Jack had predicted. Talon. Now, Jack shouted. Talon's form blurred as he shot forward. His energy blade pulsed with bright white light. He vaulted over the Guardian's shoulder and drove his blade into the exposed core. The shield flickered and collapsed as Talon twisted the blade deeper. The Guardian screamed, a deep mechanical howl that reverberated through the chamber. Talon leaped away as the core overloaded. Energy pulses erupted through the Guardian's frame. It collapsed to its knees, its plasma blades flickering. Jack scrambled back as the Guardian exploded in a burst of white light. The shockwave knocked him off his feet. He hit the ground hard, his suit's systems overloading from the impact. Smoke filled the chamber. Jack's neural implant buzzed with static as his systems rebooted. Slowly, he pushed himself upright. His head was spinning. Talon stood nearby, his armor scorched and his energy blade dim. He turned toward Jack. Jack laughed weakly. Okay, that was insane. Talon's expression didn't change. It was efficient. Jack coughed, brushing the dust from his armor. Remind me to avoid anything labeled Guardian class next time. Talon's gaze sharpened. Adapt or die. Jack groaned. Yeah. Talon's eyes narrowed toward the far end of the chamber. A massive door was beginning to slide open. Beyond it, Jack could see the dim glow of another chamber, and new heat signatures forming on his display. Jack sighed. We're not done yet, are we? Talon's energy blade reignited with a sharp hiss. No. Jack's smile returned despite himself. Good. Together, they turned toward the next fight. Jack's chest was still heaving as he stood alongside Talon, both of them staring at the dark passageway ahead. The massive door at the far end of the chamber had finished sliding open, revealing a long corridor lit by pulsing crimson lights. Jack's neural implant was already scanning ahead, highlighting a series of heat signatures moving toward them. Fast. Organized. Incoming, Jack said, wiping the sweat from his brow. His armor was damaged, the left arm barely responding to his neural inputs. His blaster was running low on power. He could feel the ache in his muscles from the last fight, but there was no time to recover. Talon's energy blade hummed as he adjusted his stance. We continue. Jack's lips twisted into a dry smile. Of course. Suddenly, the lights along the corridor dimmed, and a low mechanical hum filled the air. Jack's neural implant flashed with a proximity warning. From the darkness ahead, a series of figures emerged. Tall, slender constructs with multi-jointed limbs and glowing red optics. Their metallic frames were sharp, almost insect-like, and their arms were tipped with plasma-tipped spears. Jack cursed. E-like units. Talon's gaze sharpened. Adapt. Jack's display showed that the nearest enemy was already locking onto him. He raised his blaster and fired. The bolt hit the lead construct dead center, but it barely staggered. Its shields absorbed the impact, and it launched toward Jack with terrifying speed. Jack ducked as the plasma spear slashed past his head, burning through the wall behind him. He rolled, firing 2 more shots toward the construct's exposed joints. One shot hit, causing it to stumble. Talon was already moving. His blade cut through the air in a blur of light, slicing through the first construct's leg. Sparks erupted as the construct fell to one knee. Talon drove his blade through the creature's core, severing its power source. The construct collapsed in a heap of burning metal, but the others were already attacking. Jack shot another bolt toward the nearest enemy, but this time it dodged, twisting its frame unnaturally as it closed the distance. Jack barely had time to raise his arm before the construct's spear plunged toward his chest. Talon's blade intercepted it in a flash of white light. Sparks erupted as Talon twisted his weapon, cutting through the spear and driving the construct back. But more were coming. Jack's tactical display showed over a dozen more signatures converging on them. "We can't win this fight," Jack said through gritted teeth. Talon's expression remained calm. "Then we changed the battlefield." Jack's gaze flicked toward the ceiling. His neural implant registered a series of ventilation shafts and structural weak points. His mind raced. "Cover me," Jack shouted. Talon didn't hesitate. He launched himself forward, his blade cutting through the nearest construct. Jack sprinted toward the wall, raising his blaster. He targeted the ceiling's weak point and fired. The first shot cracked the panel. The second shot blew it apart. The ceiling above them groaned as debris began to collapse. Jack dove aside as metal beams and broken panels rained down. The constructs stumbled as the debris crushed several of them beneath the weight. Jack pushed himself upright. Talon landed beside him, his blade pulsing with residual energy. But the remaining constructs were already adapting, climbing over the wreckage. Their optics pulsed brighter as their systems recalibrated. Jack's blaster beeped a low-power warning. He swore under his breath, "We need to end this fast." Talon's gaze flicked toward the far end of the corridor. The large power conduit ran along the wall, sparking with unstable energy. Talon's eyes narrowed. Jack's neural implant calculated the odds instantly. "That conduit, if we overload it." Talon nodded once. "It will take out the whole corridor." Jack hesitated. "Yeah, but we'll be in the blast radius." Talon's expression remained cold. "Adapt." Jack exhaled shakily. "Fine." They moved together, back to back. The constructs closed in from all sides, plasma spears glowing. Jack fired into the nearest one, hitting its leg joint. It collapsed, but another 2 leaped over its body, charging forward. Talon's blade flashed as he intercepted them, cutting through the first one's head. The second construct's spear slammed into Talon's shoulder, driving him back. Talon's armor sparked, but he didn't slow. His blade slashed across the enemy's chest, cutting through its core. Jack's display showed the conduit's overload threshold rapidly rising. He raised his blaster toward the control panel. "This is gonna suck." He fired. The bolt hit the panel, and the conduit pulsed violently. Energy surged through the walls. Jack's neural implant blared a warning. "Structural instability critical." The conduit erupted in a burst of white-hot plasma. The shockwave tore through the corridor. Jack felt the heat wash over his suit as he was thrown backward. His back slammed into the floor. His armor systems overloaded, and his neural implant buzzed with static. Jack coughed, smoke filling his lungs. He pushed himself upright. His blaster was gone. His armor's HUD flickered, showing low power. He turned toward Talon. Talon was on his knees. His armor was damaged, one side burned and blackened from the blast. His blade was extinguished. Blood dripped from a jagged wound in his side. Talon. Jack staggered toward him. Talon's eyes were dull, his breath shallow. You survived. Yeah, thanks to you, Jack said, dropping to his knees beside him. Talon's gaze softened. Adapted well. Jack's jaw tightened. Don't talk like that. We're not done yet. Talon's eyes fluttered. Cannot. Proceed. Jack's neural implant scanned Talon's injuries. Critical internal damage. The armor's auto-repair systems were offline. He wasn't going to last much longer. No, Jack growled. I'm not leaving you here. Talon's hand gripped Jack's arm weakly. You must continue. Complete the mission. Jack shook his head. No. Talon's gaze sharpened. We knew this outcome was possible. Jack's throat tightened. Screw that. You're not dying here. Talon's hand slipped from his arm. His breathing slowed. Jack's neural implant showed his life signs fading. Jack's heart pounded. He reached down, grabbing Talon's arm. His neural implant linked with Talon's damaged systems. A warning flashed. Talon's core was unstable. His body was shutting down. Jack's jaw tightened. No. Come on. He forced his neural link into Talon's system. Energy surged between them. Jack's suit systems began to drain, funneling power into Talon's armor. Jack's vision blurred as his life support system warned of critical levels. Talon's eyes opened slightly. His blade flickered back to life. Jack's breath hitched. There you go. Come on, stay with me. Talon's gaze sharpened. Why? Because you're not dying today, Jack said through gritted teeth. Talon's hand tightened around Jack's arm. His blade pulsed brighter. Slowly, Talon pushed himself upright. His armor's systems realigned as Jack's suit transferred the last of its power. Jack's vision dimmed. His knees buckled. Talon caught him. Adapt. Jack smiled weakly. Yeah. Behind them, the far end of the corridor collapsed. Smoke and sparks filled the air. The remaining constructs were destroyed. Jack's breath slowed. Talon lifted him to his feet, half carrying him toward the exit. Jack's eyes fluttered. We did it. Talon's voice was steady. Not yet. Jack smiled faintly. Good. They disappeared into the smoke, side by side. Jack's vision swam as he stumbled forward, his weight pressing heavily against Talon's side. His armor systems were failing, and his neural implant was flashing red with system warnings. Talon's grip on his arm was the only thing keeping him upright. His breath was ragged, and every muscle in his body screamed from exhaustion. We're almost there, Talon said, his voice steadied despite his own injuries. Jack's head tilted toward him, barely managing a smile. Yeah, sure feels like it. The corridor ahead opened into a vast chamber. Massive black pillars rose toward a vaulted ceiling, illuminated by the flickering glow of the emergency lights. At the far end of the chamber, a throne-like platform stood raised above the floor, and sitting on it was an alien figure that Jack recognized immediately. The Overseer. Tall and elegant, the Overseer's form was wrapped in a dark metallic exoskeleton that shimmered under the dim light. Its four arms were folded neatly across its chest, and its pale, featureless face was framed by a crown of spiked metal protrusions. Its eyes glowed faintly with a dull green hue. Ah, survivors, the Overseer's voice echoed across the chamber, calm and sharp. Impressive. Jack forced himself to stand on his own. He could feel Talon's gaze on him, but he ignored it, focusing entirely on the alien figure before them. I thought you'd be more upset that we just killed your elite guards, Jack said, his voice hoarse. The Overseer's head tilted slightly. a minor inconvenience. It's rare to see organic creatures perform so well under pressure. Its gaze sharpened, especially a human. Jack's lips curled into a crooked smile. "We're full of surprises." Talon's hand pressed lightly against Jack's shoulder. "Careful," Talon whispered. Jack's gaze never left the overseer. "Why don't you come down here and see how surprising we can be?" The overseer's eyes flashed. The air in the chamber tightened. From the shadows along the walls, more constructs emerged, sleek, black forms with curved limbs and razor-like claws. "Of course," the overseer said. "Shall we test you further?" Jack sighed. "Of course." The first construct lunged forward. Jack's neural implant flared as his body responded automatically, even though his armor's servos were sluggish. He ducked beneath the attack and swung his arm upward, driving his fist into the construct's torso. The impact cracked its frame, but it wasn't enough to destroy it. The construct twisted and lashed out with its claws. Jack managed to sidestep the blow, but his legs buckled beneath him. Talon's blade flashed through the air. The construct's head separated from its body in a shower of sparks. Talon pulled Jack upright without a word. Two more constructs charged. Jack raised his blaster, but Talon moved first. His blade cut through the nearest one's arm, and with a sharp pivot, he severed the second one's leg. Jack fired into the exposed core of the second construct, blowing it apart. He leaned heavily against Talon. "This isn't going well," Jack muttered. Talon's eyes narrowed. "Adapt." Jack's gaze flicked toward the overseer. "I'm getting real tired of hearing that." The overseer's gaze sharpened. Its four arms unfolded slowly. "Shall we escalate?" The floor beneath them rumbled. From the ceiling, a massive figure descended. A heavily armored war machine, 4 meters tall, its chassis glowing with unstable red energy. Its right arm was a fusion cannon, its left a cluster of plasma blades. Jack's neural implant screamed with proximity warnings. "Talon." Talon's blade pulsed with renewed energy. "We fight." The war machine's cannon charged. Talon surged forward. Jack stumbled after him, raising his blaster. He fired a shot at the machine's shoulder joint. It barely left a scorch mark. Talon's blade clashed with the machine's plasma claws. Sparks erupted as Talon pushed forward, his feet grinding against the floor. The war machine's cannon swiveled toward him. Jack threw himself forward. He tackled Talon sideways as the cannon fired. A white-hot beam of energy seared past them, scorching the floor. Jack rolled to his feet. His suit's power levels were nearly gone. His blaster was out of charge. He looked toward the war machine as it raised its claws toward Talon. "No," Jack shouted. Jack's neural implant connected with his armor's core systems. He overrode the safety limits, channeling the last dregs of power into his left arm. His fist crackled with unstable energy as he sprinted forward. The war machine's claws slashed down. Jack's fist collided with the machine's core. The energy backlash sent a shockwave through the chamber. The war machine's body twisted violently as its core exploded from the inside. Jack was thrown back. He hit the floor hard, pain ripping through his chest. He gasped for breath, his vision dimming. Through the haze, he saw Talon rising. Talon's blade glowed brighter than ever. The overseer was standing now, its gaze sharp. Talon's eyes narrowed. No more games. Talon launched himself toward the overseer in a blur of white light. The overseer's arms unfolded, energy blades extending from its wrists. The two clashed midair in a burst of sparks. Jack pushed himself upright. His body screamed in protest. He forced himself toward the fight. Talon's blade met the overseer's with brutal speed. Jack could barely follow the exchange, light and metal clashing in rapid bursts. The overseer struck Talon across the chest, cutting into his armor. Talon stumbled, and the overseer raised its blade for the killing blow. Jack's blaster clicked empty as he raised it. He threw it aside and charged. His neural implant forced his failing body to move. He tackled the overseer from behind, driving his knee into its back. The overseer twisted, throwing Jack aside. But Talon was already moving. His blade sliced upward. The overseer's arm separated from its body. The overseer staggered. Talon's blade cut through its chest, severing its core. The overseer's glowing eyes flickered. Impossible. Talon's blade pulsed brighter. Adapt. The blade plunged into the overseer's heart. The overseer's body collapsed to the ground. Its limbs twitched once, then went still. Jack coughed, struggling to sit up. Talon stood over the body of the overseer, his breath ragged. Jack managed to smile. That was intense. Talon's gaze softened as he offered Jack his hand. Jack took it. Talon pulled him upright. Jack's gaze moved toward the shattered body of the overseer. So, what now? Talon's eyes flashed with quiet strength. Now, you have earned your honor. Jack's smile widened. Not bad for a human. Talon's expression remained stoic, but his gaze held warmth. Not bad. At all. They turned toward the darkened corridor. The battle was over. They had survived. Together.